Ladies and gentlemen, why the October 7th attack? What was the official reason for this unbelievably bold Palestinian operation on October 7th? What exactly was the reason? You would think that everybody discussing this matter around the world must know that reason. Otherwise, many people are publicly debating a topic whose centerpiece is lacking in all the public discourse on this difficult subject. That is why I believe that the mainstream media is for some reason deliberately concealing the why from the debate. A malicious effort to demonize and criminalize the Palestinian people's right to liberate themselves. So here is the reason, and it is very simple. The officially declared purpose of October 7th was to take Israelis who would then be exchanged with the over 10,000 Palestinians already held as hostages in Israeli military dungeons. 10,000 civilians, men, women, children, and the elderly, who are being tortured, raped, murdered, and sodomized in these Israeli dungeons for decades, and whom nobody is calling for the immediate release of these Palestinian hostages, which is disturbingly discriminatory, to say the least. Now, this Palestinian resistance strategy is not new. It is what they have always had to do since the 70s to liberate their people who are held hostages in Israeli jails. But then they are called terrorists for it, yet nobody calls Israelis terrorists for taking Palestinians, and nobody helps the Palestinians obtain the release of their people abducted and detained by Israel. Does anyone remember Entebbe 1976? There are even movies about an Israeli commando operation in Uganda. Do you know the one thing that the Palestinians were asking for? The release of their people held hostage by Israel. I know this because that was exactly what my father, President Idi Amin, was endeavoring to negotiate between both sides so that everyone could return home safely. Unfortunately, the Israelis, after initially agreeing to this simple exchange, they actually sent commandos instead of the Palestinian hostages they had. And here as well, nobody has since demanded the release of those Palestinian hostages from captivity in Israeli detention. So the Palestinian reason for their actions remains the same since the 1970s. They just want their people's freedom. So we must condemn the eradication of their history of suffering, the suffering of the Palestinian people, condemn the attempt to act as if nothing wrong happened to cause October 7th, condemn the invisibilization of the reason why Palestinians are forced to take resistance action, and condemn the European leaders who today mourn and memorialize one group because of religion, their European history, and their European belonging, but do not even glance at the indigenous civilians who are the actual true victims of the same brutal, toxic, unhinged, and psychotic genocidal European colonialists in Palestine. And therefore, the October 7th anniversary memorials are clearly malicious racism and outright discrimination, just like apartheid. It is white supremacism, bigotry being normalized in full global display as they invisibilize the real hostages detained in Israel simply because they are not of their European tribe. Let me remind again all the Western democracies of hate who are funding, supplying, and defending the Holocaust against the Palestinian people that the world has seen them preaching human rights in Africa while being blatant accomplices of genocide. The people of the world will never forget this moment of world history. There is, however, a process of healing, and that process of healing and reconciliation starts with apologies. Everybody knows that there was a major injustice committed against the Palestinian nation in 1948. But notice that nobody says who committed that injustice, who are the governments responsible for the suffering of the Palestinian people, and why are they hiding from their responsibility. Therefore, all the 38 countries behind UN Resolution 181 have to apologize to the Palestinian people for unilaterally creating a state of Israel in Palestine and imposing their decision on the indigenous population without seeking and obtaining the express prior consent of the Palestinian people. It was clearly a rape of Palestinian sovereignty. That is the only problem here. The international despotism behind a UN resolution that actually legitimized ethnic cleansing, mass expulsion, mass murder, and outright barbarical behavior against the Palestinians by Europeans so as to take their country. Even when nobody, not even the United Nations, had the right to take a country from its indigenous population, violently expel them, and then give that country to European colonialists. That right does not exist anywhere in international law, not even under the previous global organization known as the League of Nations that purportedly gave Palestine to Britain in 1922. What nonsense is that? Are they God? So this is the simple problem that needs to be addressed. It was clearly the colonial imperialists doing their thing under new global organizations just for legitimacy of their actions, a legitimacy which actually is inexistent. And as we constantly talk about getting to the root cause, somehow this undertaking that has caused all the death, destruction and tremendous human suffering that the Palestinian people have faced for the last 100 years to this day, that root cause is the only thing missing from the international debate today. So how do you resolve a problem without dealing with its foundational error? Let's start there. And the appropriate thing to start with would be an apology to the Palestinian people from all the 38 governments behind UN Resolution 181. Obviously, all the concerned countries, mostly Europeans, are frantically running away from all the shit they have caused in Palestine. That is the disturbing point that has been going on for decades. Yet they are also part of the root cause of all the Israeli barbarity we have been watching for decades to this day. They are accomplices in all the genocides against the Palestinian people since 1947. This is not the first genocide that the Palestinians are victims of. But these countries are yet to admit that their project, known as the State of Israel, has clearly failed. A project that perennially produces only blood and unbelievably horrendous human suffering. Never peace, thus it can only be an evil, unfair endeavor from inception. Therefore, someone has to say, okay, that's it, stop the madness. Just leave the Palestinian people alone, return the 10,000 Palestinian hostages from Israeli military dungeons to their families, compensate the Palestinian people for this 100 years of crimes against humanity committed against them, and let the colonialists in the Middle East just go back to their peaceful ancestral home countries in Europe. I promise you there will be immediate peace for everybody, for eternity, immediately from that moment. I appeal to President Trump to make America the home for all the Jews. And remember that for centuries nobody has ever refused any Jew from going back to pray in Jerusalem, ever. Jerusalem is an internationally designated site open to all people, especially the three faiths, to whom it is a holy city. It is almost the same as Saudi Arabia, that has never refused any Muslim from going for the Hajj, no matter your country or skin color, or no matter any diplomatic problems that the kingdom could have with any government in the world. The people will always be welcome for religious visits. Meanwhile, let's stop fooling ourselves. We all know that the two-state solution has been completely obliterated by the Israeli military, by their intentional destruction of Palestinian schools, Palestinian universities, Palestinian mosques, Palestinian churches, the ancient churches, Palestinian hospitals, and even Palestinian ancestral cemeteries. What does that say? What's the intention? Peace or xenophobia? The two-state solution is dead, killed by Israelis. We are dealing with toxic, genocidal psychopaths who are dancing and celebrating on TikTok as they committed these barbarities. And unfortunately, their allies defended all this. The entire society is also suffering from the same toxic psychosis of hate, all desiring to achieve a goal that is so crazy that they themselves can barely say it out loud. Yet they still seek an opportunity to achieve their so-called bigger Israel caliphate. Can you imagine they are now declaring that they want to take territories of Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Iran, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Egypt, as their finance minister has just stated in Israeli media. That ideology is what is making them commit ethnic cleansing and genocide already for the past 100 years in Palestine, and now they are taking the same exact modus operandi to its next stage. Lebanon. What was their first order? They told the population of a sovereign country to move. That's ethnic cleansing already started right there. Obviously, the countries mentioned in this Israeli Caliphate project must be in full military alert. Genocidal Israeli ambitions against your territory represent an existential threat to the entire region and the world, a threat to global peace and security. all you nations in the Middle East have the right to defend yourselves against a serious, tangible Israeli expansionist threat. Israeli radical extremism wants to ignite a medieval, genocidal and terrorist war in the 21st century. You all better prepare and coordinate to protect your people, your airspace, your territorial integrity, your sovereignty, even your very existence as Middle Eastern nations and as a united people from this existential threat. As for the rest of the world, the official reason for October 7th, what was it again? Freedom. Thank you.